Not the Footy Show.
G'day everybody, welcome to episode 227 of Not the Footy Show. I'm Warrick Nicolson and that is Robb Cox. It's time to talk about 2021. We are in the pre-season already. Teams are back at training and the first team we're going to get into, Cocksmith, is the Canterbury-Bankstown Bulldogs. What are we going to look at, mate?
Mate, we're going to look at a few signings, a few subtractions, maybe even go through their top 17 or 18.
And that's why people are here, aren't they? They're here for what we think is their top 17. They don't care about 100%. Who's in, who's out. It's just who's going to be in my Supercoach team come round one. Absolutely. Let's be perfectly honest. Look, we do a regular podcast. If you're getting us for the first time on YouTube here, it's called Not the Footy Show, as you can see. People actually listen. We don't know why. Unfortunately, we don't do them regularly enough, but that's going to change, isn't it, Cocksmith? We're committed.
Yep. We're going to do them twice a week from now on.
Yeah, maybe I'm away next week, but that's no big. I'm fishing in Arnhem Land. The Canterbury-Bankstown Bulldogs, bud, it was not a good season last year.
No,
it really wasn't. It cost their coach his job. Although it seemed like he was treading water there for a while, well, pretty much the whole time he was there. But they've made some splashes. They've picked up, 4 or 5 new players. They've cleared out a lot of what some Bulldogs fans would call dead weight. Other people would say servants of the club. And they've also brought in a new coach, Trent Barrett, the male model from Tumut, or isn't it? Somewhere near there.
Starts with a T. It's Temora.
Temora, that's it. I was close. I was in the right area. Temora Dragons, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, there we go. Rugby League Week, circa 1990 something. I used to read those score things. Baz is a new coach. Now, he had a stint at Manly, wasn't overly successful there. Lost his job, broke some patio furniture. And then he ended up at Penrith. And in the last 12 months, he has gone from, will he ever get a chance in the NRL again, to getting a lot of credit for the Panthers and their attack as the offensive coach. Trent Barrett, NRL coach, good fit?
Yeah, mate. I think he did some good stuff with the Panthers this year. If what they said that he did is to be believed, which he was their attacking coach, and Ivan was kind of overseeing both attack and defence and roster. Look, I do think so. I think that the Panthers fans may have loved him this year, but right at the end of the year, they're probably not loving him too much with the raid that he's done on the club. And we all knew he was going to do it. He's working every day closely with the players. We know they form relationships, and some may have liked Baz more than Ivan, or maybe they thought there was a better opportunity, because that grand final team, is going to be hard to keep together with salary cap restraints and everything. And it's going to be hard to get into if you're not in that kind of 18 or 19 already. It's going to be hard to get into. So for players like Matt Burton, who has apparently signed for 2022 onwards, it probably looked like a golden opportunity. So yeah, I think Baz will do a good job. I think what he learned at Manly will help him at the Bulldogs, and he's going to need help because they're a basket case, the Bulldogs, as far as politically goes. They're a political basket case. There's factions of the board here, there, and everywhere, and there's a lot of infighting going on.
Well, that whole board that's been there the last couple of years is gone. They cleaned that out. The Anderson,
right?
syndicate.
But there's still factions that are left behind, and people seem to think that it won't affect the football club. Well, it does. It does every time, and that's because you'll have factions of the board with their own agendas, wanting to, be the hero of the club. I did this, I did that, and they'll hold other people back. And it's a mess. The sooner the Bulldogs can get on the straight and narrow again, the more successful the club will be.
And I think we're seeing signs of that, to be honest. Andrew Hill, who took over a couple of years ago and inherited and probably contributed a little bit to what their salary cap was at, but he made a conscious effort. He moved on Aaron Woods, 18 months, 2 years ago, and said, for the next couple of years, it's going to be tough, but eventually we'll have a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow to spend. And what they've spent, I think, is definitely an improvement on what they've been spending. And to that, I'll give Andrew Hill a lot of credit. Obviously now working with Trent Barrett as the coach, and probably being a very much a, with all due respect to Dean Pay, Baz has got that sort of appeal to him that I don't think Dino had. And poor old Dino was he was saddled with what he had and where the club was at the Dogs. But Baz has gone out. Now, he's only got technically 2 of the Panther pups, as we were anticipating when he signed there. Picked up Jack Hetherington, who's a front row. He'll play off the bench for the Bulldogs, you'd imagine. But he also has, as you mentioned earlier, he signed Matt Burton for a 3-year deal from 2022. But they want him for 2021, and it's a question of whether the Panthers will let him go. The challenge for the Panthers is there's no clear path to first grade. He was in the squad for most of 2020, and then at the back end of the year didn't even see the first grade squad. So them convincing him just to stick around and wait for his opportunity is going to be really tough on that front. But the rest of the money that they've spent, I think, has been really smart. The first dominator for was Nick Kotrick from the Canberra Raiders. Yes, they overpaid for him, but they had to. Quite often, and we've seen this to the David Fafita example at the Titans, if you don't sign that first player, other ones aren't going to line up behind them. So they overpaid in some respects for a winger, but they've bought Nick Kotrick, I believe, for the centres. There's still an opportunity that he may even end up at fullback. I think he's wasted on the wing personally from obviously what they're going to pay him and his ability. Canberra seem to just be content with him being a winger. The other guy they picked up 2 others. They picked Corey Waddell from Manly, who's a former Penrith junior as well. I think he's a pretty handy footballer. And probably the biggest fish they have picked up is Kyle Flanagan, after he was dumped from the Roosters after 1 season. So there's a pretty good foursome for 2021 in Kotrick, Flanagan, Hetherington and Waddell, and Burton for 2021. I give him it's an A. I got to give him an A for recruitment.
Yeah, look, I don't know. I'm not going to give him an A. I'm going to give him a B. I think Kotrick was that they needed a dam buster to get somebody in that had a name, and obviously being an Origin player from last year and the squad member for this year was important to have someone of that note. Kyle Flanagan was don't think that Kyle Flanagan was a hunt. It was a pickup. They didn't go hunting for him. He would have stayed at the Roosters 100% if he felt the love there, but he wasn't getting cuddled enough there. Jack Hetherington, I think, is a good pickup. I think, you know what? I think Jack Hetherington could be anything if he can control his head. If he can control his head, or if someone can control it for him, he could be absolutely anything in rugby league. He really could, because he's got the physical presence.
Yeah, he does.
And you want an enforcer in your team. You want somebody. I've said this. We've known each other for years now. I've said it all along. You will not win a premiership without somebody that's scary in your pack. It just won't happen. You won't do it. You won't do it. And he's a scary dude. So as long as he can just stay within the boundary of what he's allowed to do. Corey Waddell, look, I never really noticed him much at Manly, to be honest. Okay. So I think he's another. I'm not sure if it was too much of a headhunt or if Manly just sort of said, "You're going, off you go." I hope he does well. And obviously Trent Barrett as the coach has attracted those players, and there'll be more. You can add Burton to the list. I mean, just on Burton, mate, I don't think Penrith should let him go. Should let him go. We'll put it this way. Look at Penrith this year. Penrith were quite lucky. They didn't get many injuries this year, which is kind of really, really weird given the year that we had that everybody knows about, where they played, 17 or 18 weeks straight, maybe even more, including finals. So Burton wants to play in the halves. Burton's convinced that he's a half. I don't think he is. I think Burton's future, depending on how big he gets, is a centre or an edge back rower, like a ball playing back rower. Just depends on the size that he ends up at. But I don't think he's a half. I think any club that he goes to will know that he might be a half for a year, and then he's going to. But I still think he can get into the Panther squad for next year. They've had a couple of issues with outside backs. I think he could easily slot into a centre position. And it might even be a ball playing kind of a centre, like that quasi kind of You know, a little bit like Bobby Fulton was back in the day, if you can remember back to black and white TV. But no, I'll give them a B. I'll give the Bulldogs a B for Bulldogs.
So 4 players come in definitely for 2021. As I say, we're hoping Burton, for their sake, comes in earlier. But that means there's 4 new blokes who will be in the 17. So if you're a Bulldogs fan who was sitting there this last year and just gone, where is the light at the end of the tunnel? Well, you've just transferred a quarter of your roster, of your starting, or your 17 basically, heading in to 2021.
Not the footy show.
And there are subtractions, and we touched on, that they were either long-serving members or, as sort of harsher critics would say, deadwood. They've moved on. Aiden Tolman, who's been a long-time servant there. Remus Smith went to Melbourne. Marcelo Montoya went to the Warriors. Kerrod Holland retired. Tim Laffey, Jack Cogger have no contract for next year. Suaso Sue went to the Knights. And the other big domino, I think it's worth mentioning, Kieran Foran. They decided not to pay him anywhere near what he was on, which you can understand from their perspective. They didn't get... I wouldn't say they got bad value out of him, because when he played, he was their most influential player. And he didn't miss a ridiculous amount of games at the Bulldogs. He missed a lot of games, but not a ridiculous. He didn't play like 1 game over 3 years, etc. And he did make their team better when he played. I thought it was a mistake them not holding on to him and then signing Blake Green, which we all know they did. I was thinking, why would you pay Blake Green the money you could pay Kieran Foran? But then Blake Green did his knee. Is now back at the Knights, basically in a development role until he's back from injury. Foran ends up Manly, and they end up getting Kyle Flanagan to fall in their lap, and then Burton. So it's worked out sensationally well for the Bulldogs, but I wouldn't say it was necessarily planned that way. I can't give them full credit for that.
Yeah, look, on Kieran Foran, mate, I can't say that he was good value. I mean, let's be honest. He played, I'm just having a look here, mate. He played 30 games for them in 3 years. Not
It's
great.
more than 2.
Well, it's more than 2. He played 9 at Parramatta.
Yeah.
Got $1 million for 9 at Parramatta. Yep. What was he on? He's on allegedly. What was he on? 800 or 900?
Yeah, he was on. He was almost on Josh Reynolds' money. Hilarious.
So he's got about $100,000 a game.
No.
Yeah, look, I think he's a great player. He was better back in the day, but even now he's definitely got a presence on the field. He's gone back to Manly. I wonder what Manly paid for him.
Probably not a whole lot, but
I wonder if Canterbury would have been willing to pay what Manly paid for him.
Well, they ended up, as I say, they ended up giving that money to Blake Green, and that didn't obviously transpire.
Yeah. So Blake Green is staying though, isn't he?
He's staying at Newcastle. Yeah. He won't be around until halfway
Newcastle
through the year if he's back from his knee injury, if he plays at all.
Yeah. Okay.
I think he's basically going on to the coaching staff, even though he's on the roster.
Unfortunately for poor old Kieran Foran and the clubs he's been involved with, he has had an injury-hampered career. He's even at Manly, I remember him hobbling off a few times for lots of games off. But on his day, sensational player. He's gone. Aiden Tolman is one I think they might miss, mate.
He's at the Sharks.
To be honest with
you. They've picked him up.
I think they might miss him. And now,
I'll be fair, not on the 4th and 5th tackle hit-ups near the line. They won't miss that.
Well, no, they probably won't. But that's not his. His job isn't to manage the game. His job's to run at the line when he gets the ball. So, but in the halves, who they've picked up in Kyle Flanagan, he's a good player. Don't worry about that. He just didn't fit in, I don't think. And I think it might have been a personality issue. It didn't fit in. I'm only guessing.
Yep.
Because let's be honest, the games that he played at the Roosters, he wasn't a shocker. He stayed in the squad.
I thought he was pretty good last year.
Yeah, all for bar 3 or 4 weeks, which apparently, from what I hear, he was stood down, not so much for his own. I think for his own mental health is a bad word, but for his own good, as far as his own development, they stood him down for a few weeks. some would say that, some words that I've heard are that he can be a bit cocky and a bit, hard to deal with. But, he's a young bloke. He's a halfback. You probably want a bit of cockiness out of them.
Yeah, he played
as long as you
a dozen games for the Sharks, and then the Roosters signed him on a big deal. I mean, you can understand how that happens to a kid.
Yeah, absolutely. All of his dreams have come true. He's going to the arguably the best club in the comp.
The two-time defending premiers.
Yeah, and he's the sacrificial lamb for what happened this year with them, and I don't think it's very fair. But they run their own race there at the Roosters, and I think it's a really good pickup for the Bulldogs. And I think if he's allowed to own the team, he'll do very well. I'm just interested when we get to their 17 on who you think is going to stand on the other side of the ruck as a half, because I've got some definite opinions on that.
We've sort of talked about the optimism element, who's come in, but are there reasons to doubt the poor old Bulldogs? There are plenty as far as I'm concerned, but there's something that stands out to you from 2020 that you just go, this is what you've got to address?
Well, I think they've addressed it, mate, in their coaching. I think the coaching was a big thing. They looked rudderless a lot of the time. Now, I'm not trying to slap Dean in the face at all, but I don't know Dean Pay, but he always seemed like a reluctant coach to me. He almost seems like a guy that probably would have been happy being an assistant coach and doing the little bits rather than the overall picture. And I think he would have done and has done very well at that in the past. Sometimes being a head coach just doesn't suit people. But I saw, they look like they didn't have plans most of the time.
Well, they were complete and kick and hope. Yeah,
and that just doesn't work these days. Some will argue that they didn't have the roster to fulfill a more ambitious game plan, but they just didn't even seem to really try it too much.
That I hear where you're coming from, and that is a comment used about a lot of teams. But sometimes the Bulldogs would play adventurous football, and you'd go, "There's a team here."
Yeah. They played a bit of ad-lib footy,
and then they just rope it in and not play any football and all of a sudden they've lost 6 in a row. And you're going, Dino, let the team play, see what you've got, because the pieces weren't in place, and this is why it informs 2021. The pieces weren't in place to seriously contend for a top 8 spot by playing it safe. And that's the question, I guess, that faces poor old Trent Barrett is, he's coming in as the offensive genius, and that term's used a lot in the NFL. And it's funny how, and if you guys follow the NFL, if you're watching, there's a couple of offensive geniuses that have scored 3 points and 0 points in 4 or 5 games this year, and the team doesn't have a win. Adam Gaze at the Jets. But that's the challenge for Trent Barrett, is that he comes in and he's gone from having Nathan Cleary, Jerome Luai, Happy Coruscant, etc., to a team that, and we'll get into it in a second, doesn't quite have that level of creativity. So what kind of football does he play with the Bulldogs? If I'm Trent Barrett, I'm going, guys, what do you want to play? And then I'll work the game plan around that and work out what I got. He can't go in, I don't think, and expect them to be able to play. And I don't think the Penrith, as good as they were in 2020, I don't think they were a extremely ad-lib football kind of team. They were a build pressure team, get to the kick, build up the pressure, and then strike. Don't know if you'll get that from the Bulldogs, but there are some pieces in place, and we'll get to the 17 in a sec, but he's got some options in attack. He's just, I think the biggest problem for the Bulldogs remains their defence. That pack, it looks pretty good on paper, but they got rolled over way too much in 2020, and that's my big concern for them is not so much the coaching, it's not so much, it's that full pack has got to hold the middle, and it just hasn't.
Mate, I think, my philosophy on defence. Defence can be taught. Attacking brilliance can't. Attacking brilliance is something that is it's instinctive. You've either got it or you haven't. But defence is an attitude. If you want to work, you can defend.
Yeah.
If you want to earn your money, you can defend. If you want to be, a candy ass and not do what you need to do, then you probably won't be a great defender. I think they've got, look, I'm just having a quick look now. They've got some pretty willing dudes that I forgot about actually in this forward pack with Josh Jackson, Adam Elliott, Chris Smith. They've got some willing dudes there. And then in the front row, Luke Thompson's a worker. Dylan Napa can be scary with Jack Hetherington. I don't know, mate. I mean, if they can get their attack right, if they can get their attack to click, and they've got the willingness in defence, which by looks on paper they should do. There's a couple of, but I don't know. They might knock on the door of the 8 this year.
Next year. Call.
Maybe.
From Roberto Cocksmith. That's the beauty of when you do 16 teams looking at the next season. Everyone can make the 8. You don't have to make room for anybody, and you can just say, yeah, they can make the 8.
Unless they're the Broncos and they can't make the 8.
When we get to them, that'll be interesting. After the break, we're going to get into the top 17 that we think will run out there in round number 1 in 2021 for the Bulldogs.
Not the Footy Show.
Okay, it's not the Footy Show 227. Warrick Nicolson, Roberto Cocksmith, and we are doing the Bulldogs top 17 for round 1 2021. A few months out, although not that far out. That's one thing we've noticed is this off-season is going to be very, very short in rugby league. We've gone through reasons to be optimistic, reasons to be pessimistic, the ins and the outs, but we get to the top 17. And Cocksmith, the Bulldogs have some seriously wide open spots in their 17 come round 1. Let's start at fullback. I'm going with a bit of it's a combination of what I think will happen, but probably more so what I think they should try. And that's finding a spot for a kid called Jake Averillo. I don't think he's a 6. I saw enough for him at the last couple of games last year that the game, he kind of waits for the game to come to him. And at 6, I don't think that's the right spot for him. Whereas I think if he's bulked up a little bit in the off-season and has the motor, I think fullback is the spot for Jake Averillo because it's going to force him to be in the game all the time. And when we see him in the game, you get excited even if you're not a Bulldogs fan. I think he's the best choice for the Bulldogs at number 1 come round 1.
Yeah, I can see why you say that, although I disagree. I think I think their best fullback is Will Hopewadi, but I also think he's one of their best centers, and I think they can use him better at center, which we'll get to. But I would put Nick Meaney at fullback. I think he was desperately unlucky. The timing when Watini Zalesnia came into the team, Nick Meaney was just starting to hit his straps at fullback, and I think he deserves another chance. In saying that, I wouldn't have Dallin in my 17, believe it or not.
Yeah, I think we're both on the same page there. Yep.
But I can see why you say with Jake Averillo. I think the reason why he waits for the game to come to him, mate, is mostly because of his age. I think he's young. And I think that he will have got a lot of confidence out of this year, just playing, not so much their results, but just playing in the NRL. He'll be prepared and ready for next year. I've got him somewhere else in the team. But yeah, so you're going with Jake. I'm going to go with Nick Meaney.
Okay. On the wings, I think Jaden Ockenbaugh, after his incident-filled 2020, he's locked in on one wing. He came back and didn't really miss a beat too much for the Bulldogs. And I think he's got the ability to score 12, 15 tries across the year. He's a pretty handy footballer, Ockenbaugh. And I think I've got Nick Meaney on the other wing. I don't have any room for DWZ. I just think he's a liability, and it's harsh for me to say it, but I've just seen 2 or 3 years of just average football. Occasionally there's a game where you go, I remember that bloke. But he's better as a winger than a fullback, though. People think he's a fullback. He has no business in the number 1. He has no confidence going for a high ball. Now, that is not a good thing on the wing or at fullback. And he can't defend, so he shouldn't be at centre. He's got to find something this off-season, and he's got to prove to Trent Barrett that he deserves a shot in first grade, because based on what I saw in not just 2020, but the last couple of years, he can't be in my 17. He just can't. So I've got Ockenbaugh and Meaney on the flanks. Who have you got?
I've got Ockenbaugh and Christian Crichton on my wings, because I've got Nick Meaney at fullback.
Yep.
But look, I think that they're kind of all interchangeable a little bit, because I know Christian Crichton can play a little bit of fullback as well. But I think Nick Meaney's a man with Ockenborough. I'm in total agreement. He's paid his penance.
Yep.
Let's hope we don't see any more repeats of that. The Bulldogs, as a club, don't want that. And yeah, Crichton, the ex-Panthers star on the other wing.
And we get into the centres now, and this is where it did my head in as a Canberra fan, not seeing Nick Cotric play, get a chance in the centres. I just cannot see the Bulldogs not playing him in the centres come round one. That's where he'll be, and I've got him alongside Will Apawade, and all of a sudden, the back line looks a little bit potent. If you've got Averillo amongst the mix, you've got Apawade, you've got Ockenborough, you've got Cotric. As I said, I've got Meaney, you've got Crichton. But Cotric adds something to this team, and I think he's underrated defensively when I've seen him play in the centres. And I think that if they go with Apawade and Cotric and give him a little bit of a license, that's the thing that I reckon clubs just... I get it from the defensive point of view, but in attack, let your most potent attacking players not just sit out on an edge and just wait for the ball. And I think
give him a license.
Exactly. And the game's definitely changed in terms of rucking the ball out. You'll see a lot more centres do a lot more of that second or third hit up. But give your best attacking players the ball, and good things will happen. So I've got Cotric and Apawade. Who have you got?
Same, mate. Yep.
Yeah.
I think, like I say, I think Apawade is probably their best fullback, but he's also probably their first centre picked, and they can use him more at centre. And Cotric deserves his chance. I've seen him play a little bit of centre, and I liked what I saw. He's got the size and the pace to be a handful. So I'd start him in the centres this year.
Just the thing on Apawade, his numbers are always awesome at fullback, but he's not a player who makes the other players better. And not all fullbacks can do that. And I'm not saying every fullback can do that. But the beauty of him playing centre, he actually makes his winger better. He actually is pretty handy on an edge when he's playing with his winger Apawade. There's more creativity. It's strange to say this from Apawade, I think, when he's playing centre than it is when he's playing fullback. There is one more name to keep in mind. Tui Katoa. Now, I don't think he debuted last year. He may have played one game off the bench. I'm not 100% sure. They got big raps on him, and he's the one that I think is a smoky for that other wing spot, ahead of Meaney potentially, or ahead of Crichton. Tui Katoa, keep that name in mind. We go to the halves. As I say, Foran's moved on. Blake Green didn't arrive. Flanagan is there. The big question for me is whether Flanagan will play 6 or 7. In this day and age, I don't think it matters what number he's got in the back. I think he'll play as a halfback, whether he's at 6 or he's at 7 in terms of a jersey number. We're both in agreement that he'll be starting. And before we get to Flanagan, you asked this question before. Who's alongside him in the halves? Do you have Averillo at 6?
I have Averillo at 6. Now, I'll tell you why. I think Flanagan will have learned a lot from the Roosters, as far as what he needs to work on. And one thing you want your person wearing the 7 to do is manage the game. And I think he will have learned a lot about that. And I think with Barrett being in his ear all off season, going into the season, I think he will be their chosen game manager. And I think Averillo will be a support act. That's what I would have him doing. Either way, Averillo's in the 17, but I like the look of him in moments with the 6 on his back. Or maybe he didn't have the 6, but he was playing in the 6th position last year or this year in 2020. I think in 2021, I think he can, he's still only very young, but I think Barrett will like the idea of young halves. He's just come off working with young halves in Cleary and Luai. And I think he will see a lot of similarities in those two. I think Flanagan, on the field anyway, he seems like a bit of a calm head. He doesn't lose too much of his cool often. And Cleary's just the Iceman, so there's a bit of similarity there. Averillo is a bit of a different player to Luai. He's probably a little bit more direct than Luai. But I think that's what I would do. And hopefully for the Bulldogs, I think that's what Barrett may do.
Yeah. Some Bulldogs fans are going to throw the phone down.
I know what you're going to say.
Smash the TV on YouTube. I'm taking into consideration what I think will happen in round one a lot in this prediction. I really think the Bulldogs will go with Lachlan Lewis at 7 in round one. Now, he's not the long-term answer. Matt Burton will come in at whatever stage and he'll be the 6 and Flanagan will be the 7. You mentioned earlier for how long is the question, but he's not the long-term answer. But based on what is available and the fact that I have Averillo at 1, I would play Lewis either at 6 or 7, whichever one you want. But I would take the game management away from him because he has dominated that for the Bulldogs for 2 years. And all they do is wait to the 5th tackle to give it to Lachlan Lewis and he'll kick. He could kick.
Oh, I wouldn't have Lachlan in my...
I know you
wouldn't. In my 17.
But my thing is, I just go, Flanagan needs to ball play more than game manage, I think, for the Bulldogs to be really... have more attacking focus. But at the same time, I just think Lewis needs to play as the second fiddle. He can't play as a dominant guy. And it's up to Trent Barrett to work with him to say, okay, I know this is what you've been doing for a couple of years, mate, but bring it back a little bit. He's a good defender. He can kick the ball. I think he should be a good second option with the ball in terms of kicking. And one of the things with the Dogs is you could always guarantee if they got into the attacking 20, what they'd do is they'd hit up. And then Lachlan Lewis would step up and kick to somewhere. That was the game plan.
Yeah, crossfield kick or something.
And I'm just
look, I think when Barrett goes in there, I really think he needs to sweep the place, start again. What they did last year didn't work, and I honestly think that a few of them need to go back to the park to play some park football. And I think Lachlan Lewis is one of them. I think Lachlan Lewis. I get the feeling, I don't know the guy, but I get the feeling just from his body language that he thinks he's killing it. He thinks he's doing well. He's not.
Stats are amazing when you see him on a piece of paper. 16
stats.
Kicks, 400 and something. But how effective are they, and is it actually helping your team? I just think.
I think he can play. Don't get me wrong. I think he can play. I just think that I'm not sure that he's playing in the right position and with the right influences in his mind about how he plays the game. I think he can play, but I think he needs to be coached a bit more. So
and that's my view.
Maybe Barrett will do that.
I just think you change what his role in the team is, and you might get a bit more value out of him. The other thing with Lachlan Lewis is the Bulldogs. We'll get to 9 in a sec, but give him a chance at hooker. Play him off the bench as you're 14 something, but he can tackle.
That's where he is in my team.
Yeah.
He's on the bench.
The other player is Brandon Wakeham, who just didn't take his chance last year. He had a couple of bright spots, and you went, he's not bad, but he's on the smaller side. He's not a great defender. And in some of the games, he really, and this is my big criticism of him, is he took a backseat to Lachlan Lewis way too much. And when you're auditioning for next year, unless it was
I think Brandon's missed his opportunity, to be honest.
Yeah.
For now. Injuries will come, and he hopefully gets his opportunity again. But for me, it's Averillo in 6 and Flanagan in 7, with Lewis to the 14.
The telling thing about Wakeham last year was he got his chance, kind of took it, then lost it. And then when he looked like he was going to get his chance again, George Alice went with Jack Cogger, who's no longer at the club, ahead of him.
Yeah.
That's telling.
Yeah.
Into the forwards, as I said, I've got Flanagan at 7, Lewis at 6 or 6, whichever way you want to work it around. Into the forwards, which they've always had good forwards, the Bulldogs. They've always had good forwards. Effective forwards, I guess, is the biggest challenge. In the front row, they'll be trotting out a pretty good foursome. Luke Thompson, who didn't set the world on fire, but I don't think we could expect him to. Without a full pre-season in the NRL environment, he'd come off ISO for he was in there for 3 weeks or something like that.
His pre-season was 2 weeks in a hotel room, mate, with some weights and a bike.
So I think if you're a harsh rugby league or NRL fan, wipe that out of your mind and go, let's judge him on what he brings to the table in the first half of 2021. He'll start at prop. The other one will be Dylan Napper, who, and you mentioned it earlier around, the aggression, the aggro, the, bit of starch in the pack. What's happened to Dylan Napper, mate? Because
we haven't seen.
this was
we
him
haven't seen. Yeah,
2 years ago.
we haven't seen that. What we saw at the Roosters, those kind of spearing in from angles, attacking with defence and stuff like that. We haven't seen that. Now, I'm not sure about Dylan's fitness as far as his injuries go. Hopefully, in the past he's had some injuries that's prevented him from playing like that. And hopefully in the future those injuries are gone and we see the old Dylan Napper again. But it was almost like we saw the hard Dylan Napper at the Roosters, and we've, dare I say it, the softer side of Dylan Napper at the Bulldogs. Hopefully for all Bulldogs fans out there, we see the return to the hard Dylan Napper, because when he plays like that, he's a handful, man, and that's what got him into Origin sides, and he might have even played for Australia. Did he? Did he play for Australia? I think he did.
Did he? Okay.
Didn't he?
I don't know.
Anyway,
project if you want out there.
Yep. But if he didn't, he should have. Put it that way. I hopefully he'll be. They'll give him another chance starting the year. Napper and Thompson in the front row, and Jeremy Marshall-King at hooker. I think that'll be the front row to start the year off.
Just before we get to Marshall-King, my Ducks fans out there, the movies, they're the Bash Brothers, Hetherington and Napper. I'd just like to see Barrett go, kids, go nuts. See what happens. You're not going to get sent off. We don't send people off in the NRL anymore. They've got to add something. They can't just go out and play there. And I think really importantly from Barrett's point of view, you can't have them sharing the 80 minutes. You need those two on the field.
Yeah, at some stage you need
at the same time. You need them on the same time. If that means that you push Thompson back to lock, maybe occasionally to start games, and so be it. But get Napper and Hetherington on the field. The Bash Brothers bring them back. The other front rower who I think will be in the squad come round one is Ofahiki Ogden, who I think will beat out Ranuf Tuamonga, who's actually changed his name, I believe, to Ranuf.
What's with that, mate?
I don't know. But he's the other front rower in the mix. It's a pretty decent. It's a really good top three, I think, for where they are as a club. And they got some good youngsters there who were 17. Getting to hooker, Marshall-King, I like him. I think he is a good footballer, but he's not the 9 that takes your team up 4 or 5 clogs in the ladder. I just don't think he is.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think he's a week-to-week player. I'm not sure, though, if he's the spark, if he's remember, someone like Josh Hodgson, he's a sparky player. Someone like, Jake Friend is a bit more of a not a journeyman, a bit more of a grinder. But Cameron Smith's obviously a game manager, and there's all different types of hookers. Cameron Smith is like
Damien
a half.
Cook. Yep. Speed.
Yeah, Cameron Smith's like halfway between a halfback and a hooker, whereas Damien Cook is a pure hooker. So I think Jeremy Marshall-King's playing out of position. I don't think, I may be wrong, but I don't think he's played hooker all of his life. I think he's more of a half.
He was a 5'8". He was
right.
He played alongside Lewis, I think, a couple of years ago in the halves there. They both sort of debuted at the same time.
Right. I think he's made a pretty successful hand of being a hooker, and I think that he should be in the squad. He's in the 17 for mine, just depending on. But I think they'll start with him. I'm just looking at, you got Sione Katoa as well. Now, Sione Katoa, at Penrith was a fairly decent player. But I don't know if he's your answer either, as far as your.
He has his moments. His moments, but I don't think he is.
They've had a little bit of it's been a little bit of a weird thing since your mate left. What do you call him? I forget his name now. The guy that's gone to Fox. What's his name? He was there for years. State of Origin hooker.
Oh, Mick Ennis.
I'm drawing a blank. Mick Ennis, the menace. Since he left, they've kind of struggled a little bit, haven't they? I mean, I think when he left, wasn't that when Cook was there, and then they said to Cook, "No, we don't want you."
Des Hasler's great great decision making. 2014 grand final. He could have picked
Yeah.
Damien Cook at hooker, and he picked Moses and By.
Yeah, good choice. But yeah, they need another. They need to develop or to buy another hooker that's going to be that premiership hooker. But Marshall King will do the job till then, I think.
Yeah, I think he'll be the 9 for sure. And we think that if they do decide to go with a utility on the bench, so I've got Lewis in my starting team, but does Katoa get there simply be from the point of view of spelling Marshall King? I guess he would in your team, potentially.
Well, no, he doesn't in my team, mate. I don't have a hooker on the bench. I've got your mate Lachlan Lewis on the bench.
Yeah.
But let's get to the back rowers, because I think the back rowers for the Bulldogs have always been strong. That's really where they get a lot of their push from, their back rowers.
Well, it seems like every off-season they buy 2 new starting back rowers, but they don't buy 2 legitimate star back rowers. It's like they just keep adding guys that
to
are
the list of back rowers.
They're goodish back rowers, and like I think 2 years ago they added Joe Stimson and Dean Britt, both not in the 17 as far as we're concerned for the round 1. This time they've added Corey Waddell. They re-signed Adam Elliott. They got Fatella Mariner, Josh Jackson. What's the back row starting for you? What's the best balance, I guess?
Well, look, I've got your list here, and I agree with what you've written. So we're in agreement, which is Fatala Mariner, Josh Jackson with Adam Elliott lock.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that back row. I think that's their strongest back row, and I think that's what they should start with. But they've got other back rowers in there, like you mentioned. They've got Dean Britt, and they've got Corey Waddell, Chris Smith. I really like Chris Smith. I've got him on my bench.
Okay.
Matt Dury. I don't know anything about Matt.
Well, he played a couple of games last year.
Did he?
Then he hurt his knee in the second last round. They've put him back to a development contract, which really surprised me. I thought they'd advance him into the top 30 this year. But I can't see him starting ahead of, like, Stimson will be healthy again. He didn't have a great start to his Bulldogs career, and it was a bit of a joke in Supercoach circles, because everyone thought, I'd be great. And then he was hopeless, so everyone just hated on him. Not necessarily for his performances, because his stats weren't good enough. It's funny how that influences people's viewpoint. And Dean Britt, I think, is a pretty handy footballer. He's sort of a back row, front row, but Corey Waddell comes straight into that bench spot, I think, as the next back rower. I don't think Barrett signed him not to be in the 17. I watched him pretty closely at Manly at different stages, and I think he's a better back rower than Gosiowski, the backup there at Manly. I thought he'd be in line to take over Joel Thompson's spot at Manly, but evidently Manly went another direction. I think he's a really good pickup, and the question for me more around whether he'll start or not is, how's Fatala Mariner going to go without Kieran Foran? Because Kieran Foran made Fatala Mariner a weapon on that left edge. That edge, whichever edge he ended up playing on most of the time. But that's the person I think it's under the most threat, because I think Fatala Mariner, if you had to, you could push him up to the front row because he's big enough.
Look, I guess it does depend on that. Having a look at the bench now, I see what you've got written down here, and do you want to tell?
Yeah, so I got Waddell, Hetherington, Ogden, and I got Wakeham as the 14/Katoa. Unless you decide to whack another forward on there, and I guess hope that maybe
no one gets injured.
No one gets injured.
A bit like New South Wales in the Origin, the third game.
No injuries, mate. It didn't happen in game 1. We didn't have to learn anything.
Look, I think it's a pretty handy bench. What you've got there, I think I agree with you that Barrett signed Waddell for a reason, and that's not to have him playing in the New South Wales Cup. So, given that, and I did see some of Waddell. Waddell didn't do a lot to impress me this year, but at the same time, he wasn't given a whole lot of space to impress. So I'd give him the benefit of the doubt, and I'd probably have Waddell, Hetherington. Ogden and Lachlan Lewis
Yep.
On the bench. So it's a very similar bench, mate. I mean, we choose probably with 2 or 3 differences, we've chosen the same 17.
Before we finish on the Bulldogs, Josh Jackson. The last couple of years, he's fallen out of the Origin arena. He's no longer playing 80 minutes. When he first came into first grade, and my flatmate's a big Bulldogs fan, so he's been a long time fan of Jackson. He was an attacking edge back rower, and it just seems like time has, and a lot of a lot of losing, has sort of caught up on his style of football. Now it just seems like he's a bit of a plug guy. And
do you think that he's been grafted into that position?
Because I think Des Hasler has that effect on some players, and I wish that he still had the running game. I don't think he does anymore. I think he's pushing 30 now. He's getting closer there anyway. But that's the big question, because Adam Elliott, in the last 2 years, has developed into a pretty handy lock forward, a busy lock forward. Traditionally, I would have said that Josh Jackson is probably better suited to 13 in the way that he plays now. But I don't think you can then move Elliott to the edge and say, sit over there and wait for the game.
Yeah, no.
And that's the question that I guess Josh Jackson has to decide under the Trent Barrett regime, is what kind of edge back rower is he? Because if he's just there to defend, I just think that really limits that side of the field. And that's my big concern from a Bulldogs fan is not so much the defence on Jackson's front. I think he's a pretty good defender, obviously, but he's got to rediscover an offload, find some synergy with whoever he ends up playing outside. He might end up outside Kyle Flanagan. He's going to have to look after him, but I don't think he should neglect that attacking game that we did see from him 6-7 years ago.
Yeah, I think he's at the back end of his career though, mate. I think he's probably got a year or 2 left. The way he plays is quite a hard game, so I don't think he's going to be a 36-year-old player playing in the NRL. In saying that, I probably wouldn't have thought that Paul Gallen could either. Very different style back rowers though. So yeah, I think it's a little concern that there's one edge that isn't really going to attack that much from a forwards perspective. But hopefully we can see a little bit more ball playing and some wingers and centers doing the business, for the Bulldogs. But yeah, I mean, that's the 17, mate. I mean, do you want to go through them?
Yeah, quickly. This is the one that I reckon is going to run out there in round 1. Combination, what I think could happen. Averillo at fullback, Ockenbaugh and Meaney on the wings, Kotrick and Hopewade in the centres. Then you got Lewis and Flanagan in the halves, Luke Thompson, Marshall King, Napa up front, Patella Mariner, Josh Jackson and Adam Elliott in the back row, and a bench of Waddell, Hetherington, Ogden and Wakeham/Katoa. So if you're a Supercoach person looking at that, you might get some information. If you're a Bulldogs fan hoping for some optimism for the season, I think you can see some there, to be perfectly honest. I think there's a little bit more points in them. They're also picking up a pretty handy goal kicker in Flanagan. And that's something the Bulldogs have traditionally always relied on, is turn 4 into 6. And Flanagan, he adds something to them. And I think you've definitely lucked out there, Bulldogs fans, getting Flanagan and potentially Burton as well, when the alternative could have been Blake Green for a couple of years. So,
well, could you imagine if they didn't get Flanagan? The scores that we've given them would look very different. They got lucky with Flanagan in a big way.
They certainly did.
Yeah.
As I said, that first domino had to fall, and that was as Nick Kotrick in the end. So that's the 17 that we think will run out for Bulldogs in round 1, 2021. There's our pre-season primer for the doggies as well. If you've got any views, hit them in the comments below. That's episode 227 on YouTube. There is going to be a bonus 5 minutes for anyone listening on the podcast. Cogsmith wants to talk about some current events in rugby league. But in the meantime, we're on facebook.com/NRL podcast. You can see our social handles above here on YouTube. We'd love to hear from you. I'd love to get a rating somewhere if you want to. And tell your friends about the fact that we might actually do a few of these podcasts heading into Christmas and the new year.
Good stuff, mate.
Not the footy show.
It's people's escape, it's people's relaxation, and we need to do everything in order to continue that great tradition of
Not the footy show.
I've got a 5-year deal here.
Pepsi.